Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Walking Down the Warwick Road. It's a podcast where we take a look at various events in Manchester United's glorious history. We took a break earlier this year, due mainly to the number of matches United were playing in that run at the end of last season, in both the cups, 3 cups, and the league. And it was getting a bit too difficult to get to matches, get tickets, watch matches, and produce a podcast. But now we'd like to continue where we left off in February. I'd like to say it's by popular demand, but I couldn't base that on any firm evidence. But nevertheless, here we go. My name's Pete Molyneux, but let me quickly introduce my partners in crime. Firstly, Mr. Roger Gardner. Roger, how are you doing?
Hello. I'm well. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Very well, yes.
Excellent.
And secondly, our very own Niagara Red, that's Tim Stockton, based in Toronto. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's good to be back, Pete. I'm excited.
That's good. That's good. And last, and by no means least, when it comes to supporting United, this man could be described as a bastion. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I've pronounced that correctly, Mr. Roy Kavanagh. Roy, say hello.
Oh, hello. Great to be in your company, the three of you. Thanks very much.
And you.
Well,
Absolutely.
yes, well, right back at you there, Roy. It does seem to have been a long time, even though we've kept in touch behind the scenes,
Yes.
all of us. So this episode is called Born to be Red, and Manchester United have always attracted a fanatical following. Be it the post-war veteran players that Busby's first great side had between 45 and 52. And then there was the incomparable Babes, who were destined never to fulfill their potential. The best Lord Charlton era, 63 to 69, it had a lot more stars than just those 3. And it was, of course, the first English team to win the European Cup. And right through since the 60s, right through to the current day where United have a fanatical following. And we saw that even in Copenhagen in the last 10 days. But even in 1934, I came across a picture the other week. United nearly went into the 3rd tier in May 1934. We've never been in the 3rd tier, but we had to win in London at Millwall. Not an easy thing to do now or even in the 30s. But United won 2-0. To stay up in the 2nd tier and then bounced the way back into the top tier. 3,000 supporters waited through the night to welcome the team home at Central Station in Manchester. So we've always had a fanatical following. So what we wanted to discuss in this show is the 4 of us have all followed United for several years in various ways and from different locations. We're probably what you'd call time-served Reds. So over this hour, we want to just discuss how we came to follow United with a passion and what it means to be a Manchester United Red and kind of why we've stuck with them. So hopefully that makes sense to the participants and to the people listening. So first of all, can we just do some quick facts? We'll start with Roger. Where were you born? When were you born? Where were you born? And where do you live now?
Okay. So I lived in the West Country until I was 11. I was actually born in Bristol, although that was because I was poorly. So I've lived in Cornwall the majority of my life. My parents moved to Birmingham in 1981, which was quite handy because that was the era of Manchester United.
And Roger, I know you're a shy person, but I don't think you shared with us when you were born. Do you want to share that with us, just so we can put a perspective on your timeline?
Yes, I'm getting older. My memory isn't good. 1970, I was born.
1970, righty-ho. And the same to you, Tim. When were you born? Where were you born? And where do you live now?
Right. So I was born in 1979. So I got my 44th birthday coming up in a few days. Born and raised and currently living in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. Haven't moved around too much. I've just been in Niagara my whole life. And just, yeah, that's me.
Okay. And Roy?
I was born on the longest day of 1947, which is the 21st of June. So I'm 76. I was born in Salford the year before the NHS started. And I was bred in Salford and I still live in Salford, which is the finest city in the world as far as I'm concerned. And a lifelong United fan because we live very close to Trafford Swing Bridge, which took you over and into Trafford Park, and there was the great Old Traffords, because I'm also watched Lancashire, which Tim's family were a major part of in the 1930s and before.
Rightio. Okay. All right, thanks for that, gents. And finally, I was born in 1954. I share the
Liar.
same affinity to Salford as Roy does, except that in 54, my parents were £10 Poms and emigrated to Australia. And I was born later that year in 54. But in a way, certainly as regards football, thank God they came back to Salford 2 years later. It didn't work out in Australia. Otherwise, I could be doing a podcast now with 3 other Adelaide United supporters. So got back in 56 as a 2-year-old and have lived in Salford all my life since, and I am now 69. Okay, so that just puts a timeline on where we're at and what sort of areas we may have lived through. But if we just go around the table again, so to speak, and we'll start with Roger again. When did you first become aware of an entity called Manchester United? So, when did you first know of this thing existing?
I think I've liked football longer than I liked music. The first record I ever bought was in 1978. Was the Boomtown Rats, and I realised today I've been liking United longer than 1976. Is the first match I can remember, and I can remember being broken-hearted. So that will tell you probably which match that was. It was the FA Cup against Southampton, of course. But I think I heard about United mostly in those days through reading about Bob Charlton, George Best and Dennis Law and the European Cup triumph in football annuals. We used to have a lot of jumble sales around Cornwall. And my dad used to come back with football annuals, and there was no internet or anything to sort of get your knowledge from in those days. So I was a good reader about Manchester United. And in fact, apart from science, I don't read very much at all, apart from Manchester United. So that habit has stayed with me.
Right. And when would you say then that you became aware of them then? When would you say they became your team? Was that instantaneous?
So I've got a bit of lineage myself that kind of mirrors Tim. When Tommy Docherty was at Aston Villa, his wife Agnes was friends with my grandma, and they lived near. And in fact, I think my grandma used to clean the Doc's house. I think if that's right. Anyway, when I was a nipper, she wrote to Agnes and said Roger likes football and likes Manchester United. And so Tommy Docherty sent me a 1976-77 poster and sent me a Manchester United. From that, well, there you go. So it hasn't been washed since 1976. And to be honest, I'm a bit scared in case I put it in the wash and the colours go or something. So that is one of my prized possessions. And just looking at the team on the back of that picture, that is my Manchester United team. And I love the picture of the United Row in the middle of that scarf as well. I thought it was probably the finest stand in British football. And I've always loved Old Trafford.
Right. Okay. Good stuff. Tim, when did you first become aware of the entity that is Manchester United?
Oh, it started when I was a lad. As when I was just a boy. Roy kind of touched on it. My dad's from Altrincham, and our family is from all over the general area there. But from Sale, they migrated to when my great grandfather Albert got a job at Strefford Town Hall across from on Warwick Road. They moved to Warwick Road from Sale on the Priory. And he said it was to take to the new job, but it was actually a guise to be closer to Lancashire County Cricket Club, where he was the treasurer. His brother Edwin was the chairman as well through 30s, as Roy kind of touched on, and so it kind of from there it sort of transcended down to my grandfather and then down to my dad and my great uncles, my grandfather's brothers. So it's very much just been in the blood ever since I was a boy. And we used to get the the odd little United knick-knack sent over from the UK that the relatives would send over. And back in those days in Canada, in the late 80s, early 90s, you couldn't get the games over here. So, we used to have to, I remember walking up to the corner shop with my dad, and we'd get the British papers, but you'd get them a week later. So you wouldn't get the results until a week after they actually happened.
Yeah.
And you might get the FA Cup final here on the CBC, which is our equivalent of the BBC, our national broadcaster. So it was difficult to follow United in those days intently because you just didn't have access to any mediums to be able to do that. The odd time we might call back over to the UK, and my dad would ask how United's how United was doing, and get the updates from the family then. But it was difficult, but it was very much passed down. My great grandfather was at the 1935-1936 Manchester United promotion dinner at the Midland Hotel, and I still have his invitation to that gala with a picture of him with the team. And when he passed, the manager at the time, Scott Duncan, was at his funeral. So I have the obituary that was in I think it was the Manchester Evening News, if I remember correctly where it's from. I have the obituary upstairs, but and I think which I've proudly showed you guys in our group chat over time. But yeah, so that's how I got into it, and it's just been with me ever since.
So that's some heritage, Tim. Are you saying that at least two of your relatives then lived on Warwick Road in Stratford?
Yeah. So actually, it's funny because when my grandfather mobilized to go over for World War II in 1940, he literally, there's a picture of him standing in the archway on Warwick Road at their house. And he actually knew some of the Busby Babes when they'd make the walk down Talbot Street and make the turn onto Warwick Road to go to the grounds. So when that happened, when Munich happened, the family had by then moved over to Canada. And my dad, I still remember my dad telling me my grandfather was wept because, he had not great friends with them, but knew some of the lads as they would walk, down to the ground at that time and would be friendly with them. So
very good.
Yeah.
Well, that's a tremendous heritage, and for those people that come across this podcast, it was Tim that inspired this podcast to get us together. Not this episode, but back in 2020, that we should do something called Walking Down the Warwick Road. And I can't remember exactly what I thought, but it was probably along the lines of, well, what does this guy that lives in Niagara Falls know about Warwick Road, Stretford? But I needed my education improving on that, and Tim put me right on that. So great story, that, Tim. Right, Roy. So we just want to know, when did you first hear then about Manchester United being a thing?
Before I start that, great story that, Tim, and you should be very proud of the Stockton heritage for the cricket at Old Trafford, particularly. That all came about from my grandmother, who had a very romantic name called Sabina, and in her day was a most beautiful lady. She was an original Tiller girl, and my gran lived with us, and every day she would walk up our alley, back alley, to the corner shop, and she would get a pint, a gill of beer, and she had a shawl on, and she'd put the beer under. And on a Saturday, I used to walk up with her, and on a Saturday, 4, 5 o'clock, she had a bit of a rest, and we stood, and blokes were coming back from football matches, and she would say to them, have you got a programme spare? And they'd give her a programme. And of course, that started up my love of collecting football programmes. And the programme they were giving her was the Manchester United Review.
Right.
So consequently, that's the first time I would have heard really about Manchester United, 6 or 7. And of course, my mates at school were kicking footballs around and slightly older. And then, of course, I started going in 1955. So that's my first introduction to the name of Manchester United.
Well. God bless Sabina. Right. No, that's a cracking story, and it's funny how sometimes that was just obviously serendipity, for want of a better word. Once you were not hanging about, then you saw this lady going past, and that started got a lifelong love, you know. But, right, okay. I used to, when I was 8, I used to go outside and kick a football about with my next door neighbour called Dave. And this Saturday afternoon, we were kicking a ball about, and he said, "Let's be 2 teams." So I said, "Right, who do you want to be?" And we knew a bit about football then, not a lot, but he said, "Oh, there's a final on at the moment. My dad's watching it." I said, "Oh yeah, my dad's watching it." So I went inside and asked my dad who the 2 teams were, and it was the 1963 FA Cup final. And he said, "It's Manchester United versus Leicester, son." So we both ran out then, me and Dave, and started kicking the ball about. But we couldn't decide who was going to be who. So I ran back inside and asked my dad which colours the teams played in. And it was a black and white telly then, colour hadn't come in. So he says, well, the dark strip is Manchester United in red, and I think Leicester were in all white then. They changed over from their blue, because in black and white you couldn't tell the difference. So me and Dave went back outside, and for some reason I chose the team in red. It was the red that attracted me. And Dave Hibbert, as he was called, was happy to settle for Leicester City. So that's how I became aware of a thing called Manchester United. And we played out the FA Cup final over the next hour or so, where I was United, he was Leicester. Otherwise, I could be doing a podcast with 3 Leicester supporters this afternoon. But thank the Lord, I chose Manchester United. And that was my first knowledge of there being something called Manchester United. So if we can move it forward, gents, we want to talk now really about, we'd heard of this thing called United, but when did we first go to watch United in the flesh, so to speak? What was roughly the year, the date, if you know it, the match, the venue, and what were any special matches about that day that you remember? And we'll go back to Roger for this, if you want to take us away, Roger. Your first game in the flesh.
So that was the Charity Shield, 1907. Obviously, Liverpool had won the league. We'd won the FA Cup under Tommy Docherty, and then obviously his managerial career at Old Trafford imploded. But there's quite a nice story, really, between how I got to go to my first game. I was wondering what the date was. It was 13th August 1977. My dad was a Methodist minister, and he often used to swap houses with friends of his around the country. So if he wanted a holiday, he would just swap his house in Cornwall for a house in another part of town and get a free holiday. And in August, he swapped houses with a minister in Kilburn, and we went on holiday to London for 2 weeks. And what must have been the Friday, the 12th of August, we were walking down the street and in the town somewhere, and there was this guy selling roses. So I said to my dad, can I have a rosette? And there was a red rosette. So my dad sort of paid the guy for the rosette. Obviously, I had a Manchester United one. I didn't have a Liverpool one. And the guy said to my dad, so are you going to the match tomorrow? My dad isn't a United fan, so he said, oh, what match is that? And the guy said, oh, it's the Charity Shield at Wembley tomorrow. Obviously, my dad knew what the Charity Shield was. So my dad said to me, what, do you want to go? And I'm like, yes, of course I want to go. So my dad took me to the Charity Shield at Wembley. My vivid memory, which he wanted to know about the whole thing, probably was walking along Wembley Way. And back in the day, Wembley was a bit of a dump, if we're going to be honest. Still sort of a really nice place to go as a football fan, I think, when you were inside. But what I remember were all these beer cans that were along Wembley Way. And of course, being 7, I was only 7 at the time, the great joy I had was kicking the cans. My dad was getting madder and madder with me as I was walking nearer the stadium, kicking the cans along the road. Anyway, get in the stadium, and I sat somewhere along the side of the pitch, down at the front. I think they had cheaper seats that were benches at the front of Wembley, so it wasn't the most comfortable seat that I've ever sat in. And I remember a couple of United players coming in, taking a throw in. I remember Arthur Augustine, and I can remember Gordon Hill sort of running past me a couple of times. But if anybody wants to come to Old Trafford with me or to watch United with me, be warned, because I do have a record of watching 0-0 draws, I'm afraid. And the Charity Shield in '77 was no exception to that rule. However, there was another game I was able to see very close to this time, bearing in mind I live in Cornwall. And this was largely thanks to the misbehaviour of Manchester United fans. So United had to play the Cup Winners' Cup game against Etienne, 300 miles from Old Trafford. And 300 miles from Old Trafford, apparently, and with a ground that you can get a good number of people in at least, is Plymouth Argyle home park. So luckily my dad in Cornwall was quite well connected with some people, and my friend got me a ticket and took me along to home park to see all of my heroes play Saint Etienne, who I think they reached the semi-finals of the European Cup the year before. So they were a hell of a team. So my first 2 United games that I saw were very, very special to me.
Well, I remember the Charity Shield very well in '77, even though it was a dull 0-0 draw, but famous for Kenny Dalglish's debut, I think, for Liverpool, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And of course, it was Dave Sexton's first game in charge as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Very, very appropriate that it was a 0-0 draw, I'd say then.
Yeah.
So if I understood you right there, Roger, you weren't going to go to the Charity Shield. It was just, again, serendipity. Somebody was passing that had some tickets.
Yeah. No. So literally, the guy was selling rosettes. He must have been there thinking, I'll make a buck or two on the Charity Shield. And, I said to my dad, can I have a rosette? And the guy said, are you going to the Charity Shield? I can remember him saying it to this day.
And you were how old then? You were only 17?
7.
Yes, of course. Yes, sorry. My maths is terrible. So that must have been really like getting the Charlie getting the ticket to the chocolate factory.
Exactly that. I mean, certainly actually getting a ticket for the Perth Cup Winners' Cup game really was like getting a ticket for Charlie in the chocolate factory, because everybody in Devon and Cornwall wanted to go and see Manchester United. And people still talk about it locally. Plymouth Argyle actually had an end-year roll that they used to publish every year, and I got it in 1977. And I read the section on the Manchester United game, and there's a great picture of Louis Edwards, who obviously travelled down for the game, and he's presenting a cigarette case, a gold cigarette case, to Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police for helping them put the match on. And you just think that probably wouldn't happen today. But Louis Armstrong, the chairman was there, and it was a great night like this.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Okay, Roy, when did it finally happened for you to go to see this team that Sabina had casually introduced you to? When did you actually get to see them play?
Well, the first times I can 100% memorize was 1955. And I can vividly remember going to the FA Youth Cup game against Plymouth Argyle, funnily enough, Roger. It was Plymouth Argyle and United at Old Trafford. And in those days, the youth team would kick off at about 11 o'clock in the morning, and the reserve team would play follow on and play at 2. And I went, and I know I definitely was at this game, and the following week's football program has got a picture of the match against Plymouth on it, and Plymouth had these green shirts, and on the back they had like a white box, and of course the number of the player was on the back of them. I remember the colour and everything. But the United team that day, the half-back line was Coleman at 4, Edwards at 5, McGuinness at 6. Kenny Morgans was number 7. Bobby Charlton played, and Shea Brennan played. So they had a pretty good youth side, and they won the game obviously comfortably by 9-0. And Jack Rowley had actually just taken over as manager, one of United's legends from the 48-52 team. He'd just taken over as manager at Plymouth Argyle. And what's incredible about that game is that 3 weeks from that date, which was the 12th of March, 1955, so the first Saturday in April 55, Duncan Edwards made his international debut for England against Scotland at Wembley. I mean, it's incredible. 3 weeks earlier, he was playing 11 o'clock in the morning for the youth team, and there he was making his international debut. The first time I can vividly remember the first team was the game against Chelsea, the last game of the 54-5 season. And Chelsea had just won the league title that year. And that was the first time in their then 50 years existence. And it would be another 50 years before they won it again when Mr. Abramovich turned up. But in those days, the Stretford end was just a totally open. You imagine you were stood in the goal at the Stretford end, looking back, and you would just have this huge terracing, no cover whatsoever. A bit like the Holt end used to be at Villa. Massive end. And I know we were on the Stretford end for that game. We came out, I was still only about 7, and I had my autograph book with me. And we come round, and we turned up where the Munich tunnel is now, because that's where the players' entrance used to be, halfway along that area. And outside the players' entrance was this coach, old-fashioned coach nowadays, seeing it. And my dad said, give me an autograph book. Give me his autograph book. And I can vividly remember, I'm 7, by the way, we just watched United in Chelsea. And he climbed on board the coach to get all the Chelsea autographs for me, which is brilliant. But suddenly I'm stood outside, and the coach starts moving up the forecourt, up to the forecourt. I'm still stood like outside the players' entrance, thinking, how do we explain to my mum that my dad's just been taken to London on the Chelsea bus? But thankfully, it stopped. And of course, the forecourt in those days, it didn't have the Holy Trinity statue or anything like that, the souvenir shop. It just had the scoreboard end, and people would park the cars. And of course, there wasn't as many cars around 54-5. But my dad got off the coach, and I was walking up to him, and there I was. So it was a pretty memorable day. United won 2-1. And of course, the next 2 seasons, they were themselves going to be the league champions. And those are my first vivid memories. The FA Youth Cup tie with Plymouth, 11 o'clock start, and beating Chelsea in the last game of the season.
How far did the coach go with your dad on it, leaving you as a 7-year-old behind?
Yeah,
I was wondering the same thing.
You'll know where the old players' tunnel entrance was, Pete, won't you?
Yes.
Halfway down. So it went from there up to the road at the top,
Right.
the Warwick Road, because it was it was a big forecourt, and as it got to the top, they must have realised that this bloke with his flat cap on wasn't actually one of the Chelsea stars that has just won the league title, and off he came. But he brought back. I've not got it now. I can still remember it, but all the autographs in Ted Drake, famous name, was the Chelsea manager. Ron Greenwood, who became an England manager, he played for Chelsea that day, and Roy Bentley, a famous player, and all the Frank Blunstone as well, who became Tommy Docherty's one of Tommy Docherty's coaches, was also on that coach.
Okay, yeah, and no mention at all of the social services being called in because your father abandoned you. I give him 10 out of 10 for his dedication to collecting autographs and memorabilia. 10 out of 10 for that. Probably about 3 out of 10 for childcare.
Well, yeah, unless he wanted to get rid of me. I mean, he possibly made his mind up after 7 years of listening to me.
No, I think if that was true, Roy would have stayed on the coach. Right, well, so Tim, there you are, 3,000 miles away,
Right.
From where United play usually, and around the country. How did you get, and when did you get to first watch United play there?
Well, as soon as I turned 18, I told my parents I'm old enough to travel by myself. I'm going over to Manchester to see United. And when my dad found out that I was going, he said, "I'm coming with you." And my brother said as well, "Yeah, I'm coming too." So it was very much a family affair. And it was May 1st, 1999. And there was a young Tim standing with his brother outside of standing outside of Old Trafford. We played Aston Villa that day. There's the program now. The program signed. My cousin was getting trained by a personal trainer who was also happened to be a security guard at Old Trafford, and so we were staying at my cousin's house. And when the security guard found out that we were from Canada there to see United, he was kind enough to get us some autograph programs that day from the players as they came out. And there's with a ticket. So that's in a frame that I have hanging in my house. It's just a memento of the of my first ever trip to Old Trafford. And it was
this was during the run-in for the 99.
Yes, yeah, it was during the treble season. What a time to go, right? And it was just during the run-in, as you said, Pete. And it was just the atmosphere, and it was a fever pitch being over there. And during normal times, being excited, it would be so exciting to be over there. But particularly during the run-in, it was even more exciting. And yeah, just a tremendous game. There's nothing quite like walking out and if yourself, Pete, getting to be there week in and week out, and Roy and Roger having been to, being in the UK and being able to go to multiple games, I can speak from a international perspective that, walking into Old Trafford for the first time is absolutely breathtaking. It just takes your breath away as soon as you see the pitch. You see the cauldron of the stadium open up as you get into the arena, and it really is breathtaking. And it's if you haven't had a chance to experience as an international supporter, I highly recommend, if you get an opportunity to get to Old Trafford, it's a cathedral, and it's just absolutely amazing. And to be there with my dad and my brother was even more special. I'm not sure if Alan Keegan was the stadium announcer at the time or not, but someone had tipped off the stadium announcer that were there, and so over the PA system before the game came, we'd like to welcome the Stockton boys from Niagara Falls, which was another added touch. The game was poised. It was 1-1. And in the 46th minute, up stepped David Beckham. And I know, and I've heard you, Pete, talk about your love affair with Best Law in Charlton and just the coolness factor that those players oozed back in the day. Well, for me, as a supporter in the late 90s, David Beckham with the flowing hair and, dating Posh Spice was sort of my, right around the same age as me. And he stepped up and just beautiful free kick right into the top left corner, I believe. And we were right in line with it. And I just remember my dad turning to me and saying, right, we can go home now. It was a magical day. The whole day was just absolutely magical. We went to the cliff, I think either the next day or a couple days later. So these are photos that I snapped at the old cliff training ground. Different vibe back there. We were able to walk right up to the fence that surrounded the cliff, and watch the players train. So tremendous trip, magical day, magical first trip.
I can imagine, especially with. And did you feel that heritage? Obviously, you probably did walk down the Warwick Road.
Yeah, we did. That was part of the magic for me because obviously I had never seen the house where my grandfather lived in and where my great-grandfather, the family lived in, and so being able to see that now, I've seen it a couple times since then, and a couple more trips to Old Trafford. I think it's some sort of physiotherapist building or something now, or it's just some sort of business. But yeah, to see the house, and I got a picture standing in the archway the same way my grandfather did when he left for with the BEF in 1940. It's tremendous.
No, that's good. And even if you lived on the doorstep, to go in that ground is something special. But to travel 3,000 miles and also wait so long, because you weren't that old, you were just over 18, but you've probably been longing to go for a while. And I can imagine. I remember the match very, very well. The atmosphere would have been tremendous anyway because of that running. It was a fantastic running, and it was coming to a climax between us and Arsenal. And of course, we by then we would have been in the European Cup final, and probably in the FA Cup final. So it really was brewing up very nicely. So that atmosphere that day, there's I can't remember if they could get 70,000 in there, but however many they could get in, were just baying for United to get on and win the league, and then go on and win the treble. So a great debut in every way.
Yeah. It was, tremendous.
Well, if I move on from when I had been out playing football and heard about United playing in the '63 Cup final, I must have been bitten by the bug then, because I'd asked my dad at the start of the next season in the August, could I go and watch United? I was too small and too young, he said, but he took me to the Youth Cup games that season. And I was very lucky because that turned out to be the first time United's youth team had won the Cup since the Munich crash, won the Youth Cup. And it would be the last time until the class of 92. And in that team in 63-64 was Georgie Best, David Sadler, Fitzpatrick, Jimmy Rimmer, Willie Anderson, Johnny Aston. Very good team, youth team that won the Youth Cup. And I saw it all the way through. We beat City, beat Swindon in the final. But he still wouldn't take me, my dad, to a first team match because of the size of the crowds and the size of me. But the season after that, then 64-65, it got to the September, and I used to put the flags out for a rugby union side at Sedgley Park in Whitefield, and get half a crown, which is about 12.5 pence now. But I'd always ask my dad before I did that for the first few games that season, could I go to Old Trafford? He says, no, not yet, son. But on this day, the 26th of September, 1964, I asked him, and to my amazement, he looked at my mum and she nodded, and he said, go on, take him. And I went with him. And the hairs are standing up on my arm now as I say it, because that just opened a door and a journey in life that's just been incredible. But United were playing Tottenham Hotspur. 60 odd thousand in the ground. We drove to the ground, walked down Trafford Road. I had to take 3 steps for every one of my dads to keep up with him. I seem to remember that. But just going up into the stadium, which would have been where the Alex Ferguson stand is now on the United Road, and the roar of the crowd and the smells and the green, as Roy said, of the pitch stands out. And the roar when United came out just absolutely took me. Just was like an instant drug. I've never needed any chemicals to have fun in my life, any added chemicals, but it must have been like a shot of heroin, I guess, in the arm, because I just bought into it right away. We won 4-1. Law got 2, and Paddy Crerand got 2. That must have been a rarity, but that set me off. I got to my first team game ever. I was 10, just turned 10. And luckily, my dad decided he would take me to all the games after that when he went. So I got to most of the games for the rest of that season. Got to nearly all the games till about 1967, and then went 18 years without missing a home game at all. So I really did get the bug, and just fell in love with this team that was Manchester United. So Tottenham Hotspur. So if I can, good stories there, lad. Sorry, I'm not handing out the applause very well as the MC, but varied stories, interesting stories. But a simple question now, if we will. So there we are. We'd all kicked off. We'd heard of this team and we'd got to watch it. What I want to cover now, briefly, if you can, is why you stuck with it. Why did it grip you? And we'll start with Roger. How come? All right, you'd gone to see that Charity Shield with a bit of luck, thanks to that rosette seller, and later on you went to see United bizarrely play at Plymouth Park against Saint Etienne. But why aren't you now a season ticket holder at Home Park, Roger? Why did you stick with Manchester United? What was it? What is it? What was it?
I think what it is, you read about the Busby Babes and probably even back to the 30s when things were interesting at United. Obviously, the 60s, were really successful, and, we thought they would probably never end those days, didn't we? So from obviously the point that Dave Sexton took over, which was the point that I started watching, right up really to when Fergie got it right, things were looking a bit thin, but I never gave up, because I was sure that one day things would get back to where they were. Obviously, the Holy Trinity being what they were weak, and I don't think we'll ever see that again. They all won the Ballon d'Or, and they were all unique players. But there was still something about Manchester United that just made me think, I don't care that they haven't won the league since 1967. I think they must stick with it. And I really enjoyed the Atkinson era. I thought, when the football was good, it was very good, and when it wasn't, it was awful, to be polite. But we came close, and I just hope that one day somebody would be able to put us, back where we belong, really. I've known some great United fans, that I've had as friends. And their commitment, much like yourself, is mind-boggling. I worked with a hospital porter who earned about £35-40 a week. Not a lot of money, but he used to spend nearly every penny he earned going to Manchester United on a Saturday, getting the coach. He'd go to the pub beforehand, have a couple of pints, and he'd always bring me back a programme, and he'd never have any money off me for the programme when I didn't go, And so I think actually fans keep you going back. The people that you meet, the conversations you have in the ground. Maybe you don't sit next to they're sat next to everyone, but there's something about Manchester United that just brings people together. And I love Old Trafford, and I know people knock the ground and say it's not as good as other grounds now, but there's so much history, and I love Old Trafford, and I would be absolutely gutted if we built a new stadium somewhere else, because it wouldn't be Old Trafford anymore.
Don't believe all the stories you hear about Old Trafford falling apart. when I go to that ground every home game, and not so much lately, but when we buzz in, when the team's buzzing, that ground is absolutely superb in atmosphere. And when we're playing badly, even the meat pies are no good. So the Old Trafford Stadium, Tim, I see it on social media. It's got a couple of leaks and whatever, but it's still a fantastic place to be to watch that team. You know. So, but I don't think the fans will allow them to rebuild the stadium anywhere else. I hope not in my lifetime.
Can I tell you something else? Because I may talk to the other guy. When I first got a league match ticket book, I sat down before I bought it and thought, where am I going to have it? Am I going to have a nice seat in the United Road? The first game I ever saw at Old Trafford was on K-Stand. I saw a 0-0 draw with Arsenal in '87, first home game of the season. But when I got my league match ticket book, I thought there's only one place I can go, and that was the Stretford end, because the ground looked perfect from the Stretford end. I absolutely loved Old Trafford all the way round. The seats were so, you got such a good view from the seats. And when you think about all the people that have adorned the Stretford end and Dennis Law and so on, that's where I had to go. And when I went with friends, because obviously you can stand wherever you like, half the time I'd forfeit my ticket that I'd got on the Stretford end to go and sit in the seats elsewhere. I can't imagine having a ticket on the Stretford end on Saturday and think, I'll tell you what, I'll go and sit in the East Stand instead. It just wouldn't happen. But that's loyalty for you.
Oh, I can understand why it had to be the Stretford end, Roger. There's just something magical about that place, whether it's the 60s or the 2020s. Okay, Roy, so there you are. You'd got your dad back. You'd seen United beat Chelsea, the champions, and then you went on to the next few years to see Manchester United become champions of England for 2 years running, which is no mean feat. But why wasn't your head turned by the great Wolves team that followed that of the late 50s, 58, 59, 60, or the great Spurs side that won the Cup twice and won the double, the first team in the 20th century to win the double? Why wasn't your head turned by Wolves and Spurs? Why did you stick with Manchester United?
I think, I don't know if it's a generational thing, but what's your first team and they become your team and you stick with it, good and bad. I mean, you turn up, they win, they lose, they draw, you enjoy, you're disappointed, you're annoyed, you're happy. But your team, there's no social media, of course, in those days, which is making such a massive impact nowadays. And, from 1954, 55, to see the green of the pitch, which I can't emphasize enough just to see the green, because there's no colour televisions. And, there's no green around where I lived in Salford, as I said. And there's this green, and then the real colour of those football shirts, like Pete's just mentioned there, Wolverhampton Wanderers and the Busby Babes, seeing them in the youth team, the reserves, and winning into, and then of course Munich, which I still vividly remember. And then the days of Best, Law, Charlton, Sir Alex arriving, interviewing Sir Matt in his old office in 1983, winning European Cups, World Club, and that's a trophy that's much maligned and should be lauded far more. World Club champions, as in you are the best team in the club team in the world, and your team. And as far as I'm concerned, they'll always be my team. They're my life, and Manchester United is part of it, my life.
No, spot on. So Tim, you'd crossed the Atlantic. You'd seen your heritage family home, and you'd seen Manchester United playing a great game. And it had been everything. Sometimes when dreams come true, they don't always turn out to be great, but yours did, I guess. Not just with that match and that trip, but ever since. But how come once you got a little bit older then and into your 20s, you didn't think, hey, this MLS is a real good thing over here in North America. I'll ditch that Man United stuff because I won't see them very often. Why did you stick with Man United rather than watch Toronto FC?
Well, you know, of course, there's the family ties, which I talked about, but you know, having been over there and you know, been there during the trouble year, and then you know, I came back and it was late in May, not even a month later. So it was just over 3 weeks that I'm now watching United win the treble. How do you move on from that? It was just, and the fashion in which they won it as well. It was just, really was, you know, that I look back at that period of my life, that year of my life was just storybook, and a storybook ending, watching them win the treble, and that just, not that there was ever any doubt, but it just became fanatical from that point on. And in my 20s, you know, it just became, you just fell more and more in love with this club. And Roy touched on one of my other great loves is history. And there's no other sporting club in the world for me that has the history that Manchester United has. You know, there's some big clubs and some great clubs out there, but you know, you look back at the triumph and the tragedy, you know, rebuilding from, you know, the ashes of Munich, and how that affected not just the club, but the people of Manchester, and, you know, how the whole city came together, you know, moving on to, you know, Doc's Red Army, the 80s, and then through the 90s. And you read all these, you know, start engrossing yourself and reading the books and talking to longtime Reds like you guys about, you know, your memories of the club and the stories, and you know, the football specials episode that we did, Pete, like that it just becomes a part of you. It just becomes a part of life, and it's just something that, you know, it's much like it becomes one of your family members, and the great supporters, the great people that you meet that support the club as well. You know, my away days are over here generally on preseason tours. So I just got back from New York in July, and Reds from all over the world were there, and, you know, got to talk to Andy Mitten and, you know, some of the other, you know, longtime Reds that that have their own independent fanzines that cover the club. It's just tremendous people, a tremendous club. There's nothing like it. Nothing like being a Red.
No, that's right.
Mm.
Very, very eloquently put there, Tim. And it's great to get that perspective. Somebody that lives so far away, even though the connection. Roger down there in the southwest. In a way, we're lucky, Roy and I. You can almost see Old Trafford from our bedroom window. Not that Roy and I share a bedroom. I just want to put that.
Not now, Pete.
No. But it is a funny one, and in posing the question, sometimes you have to kind of self-analyze a bit. But we've all talked there about there was rough times, but we stuck with it, and then there's been great times. We've risen to some highs as a club that other fans will never experience, and that make it so special. I just know that as a 10-year-old, it bit me. As I say, it became a drug. I was Georgie Best and the players that played with him from 64 to 68 lit up my late infancy and my early teens. They really did. History, geography, maths just couldn't do it for me. Even though basically I had the ability, I proved later in life I had the ability, but they all came second to Manchester United through those formative years. So did girls, so did drugs, so did discos. I was interested in those things, but there was no drug like Manchester United. There was no girl like Manchester United. And as I went through my teens, I loved just running with the pack at the Stretford end, home and away. Every away game was an adventure, whether we won, lost or drawn. And you talk about that family, Tim, that United family, when you were taking 8 to 10 to 15,000 fans to away matches, there was just something special about that. It was a bit lawless, yeah, and it was different times, but it was special. But I never outgrew it in a way through my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I just had the bug. And when we all refer to great times when we won trebles and doubles, or the first time we won the league in 26 years, but we also went down to the second division. Certainly, Roger probably remember that, and Roy will. And we stuck with them. We stuck with them. Nobody protested. Nobody said they were giving up on United. We stuck with them. And that was because of the love of the club. It wasn't because we were glory hunters. It wasn't because we were playing great football or had great players. We had them before that and we had that after that. But in that time, between about 71 and 75, it got pretty grim. But we stuck with it. In fact, our loyalty was tested and proven beyond any shadow of a doubt. So, like Roy, I hope it stays with me till the day they carry me out of J Stand. I hope that's not too soon. I would like to see us start winning regularly again. But Manchester United is absolutely something special. Whoever you support, you're loyal to that team. But when you follow Manchester United, it just takes you to a different level, a different adventure. And there was a song in the 60s, a number one hit by a group called the Tremolos. Roy will remember. And it was called Even the Bad Times Are Good. And for me, following Manchester United for 60 years, even the bad times are good, and the good times are absolutely superb.
Yeah.
Well said, Pete.
And they always come back. The good times will come back.
Yes.
Yeah,
No
yes,
doubt about
indeed.
it.
Well, Pete, it's good to be back. That hour is just flown by. Roy, Roger, it's good to see everybody and be back reminiscing about United. This was a special one, I think, for all of us, looking back on how it started for us, our first match, and why we're so in love with this football club. I want to thank everybody for watching, or if you're listening on the audio version of the podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Warwick Road Walk. That's our main Twitter page. And if you look in the description there, you'll see a link to our YouTube channel where you can watch all of our streams, as well as another Twitter handle for where we've compiled all of the episodes, where you can click them individually and watch them right from Twitter. So a couple of options for you. We're on audio version across all major audio podcast mediums. So if you could drop us some comments on YouTube, or drop us comments on Twitter, let us know how it started for you. Let us know why you're so in love with United and what keeps you coming back. And we'll see you next time when we take another walk down the Warwick Road. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.